now. What my family do, your parents will Fred now, no price, no market. And I want to have your reaction on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My question is to Ali Salman sir. Just a minor comment. You mentioned that Iqbal was a critic of socialism, and you also mentioned that he wrote Al-Iqtisad in 1904. He was hardly 30 at that time, and we have to view it in that context. You know, the Bolshevik Revolution took place in 1917, and by then Iqbal had also traveled to Europe. And after that, I want to direct your attention to what he wrote after 1904. Al-Iqtisad may just be a minor event in the history of Iqbal, but you need to look at his poems like Sarmaya or Mehnat, where he's talking about the workers. You need to look at his poems where he's explicitly talking about admiringly about the Bolshevik Revolution. There are so many poems. So just mentioning Al-Iqtisad and just making a conclusion that he is critical of socialism, I think you probably either have not read those poems or you are just, he was hardly 30 even when he wrote Al-Iqtisad, and he never went back to that work. You know, his thought evolved like all great thinkers do. Similarly, I think Ali Shariati, we just marginalized him as a Shiite thinker, but he was not just a Shiite thinker, he was an anti-colonial thinker. He has also, you mentioned Ayatollah Baqir Sadr, but here is also someone who deserves our attention. He has talked a lot about the concept of property, the Islamic concept of property in the context of socialism. And of course he's educated in the Sorbonne, but he is also looking at what the whole tradition of Islam or property, and he is doing it from an Islamic socialist point of view. And he is probably one of our most original thinkers. And when I mean I'm not saying Shiite or Sunni, I'm looking at the whole tradition of Islam. So we also marginalize our thinkers, by dividing them into Sunni and Shiite. Yesterday a speaker referred to Ayatollah Sadr as Shiite. What do we mean by that? Islam is a very eclectic tradition, Sunni, Shiite or whatever. Why do we marginalize, unnecessarily, a Sunni theory of economics, Shiite theory of economics? I think we don't want. Islam can do without sectarianizing even the subject of economics and intellectual thought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a brief comment that I would argue that it would be important to go beyond political arguments about this polarization between and Islamic thought, because academic knowledge has already established that there are many more differentiations on both sides, and that in fact there are many more connections on both sides. For instance, the so-called Western or secular perspective cannot be reduced to just this one profit or market-oriented perspective, because there is a struggle about inclusive society, about ethnic economy, also on that side, which has been extremely influential and which is very important even today in all the countries. In fact, during the history of the market, there probably has been no time when the market has been completely unregulated. So the discussion is about the types, ways, means of regulation. The other point is that Islam was not opposed to reason. Within Islam there was a strong debate on reason around the 10th, 11th century. Intellectual debates around the Mediterranean have been held in Arabic for both European, Mediterranean, other cultures, and Said Ahmed has argued that God would not have given reason to mankind if he had not wanted it to use it. Thank you.
It's a question to Professor Ali Salman. You talked about the natural resources and as a gift of God, and you said that they do not be managed by private property, but in a collective way. And my question is about the oil resources, or globally the natural resources. Do you think that in the Muslim countries they are managed the way they are managed is compliant with this Islamic rule or not. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is, Sir Ali and Dr. Asad Zaman. You mentioned principles, and whenever we sit in the economic discussion, Islamic, we just discuss the principle of riba. Don't you think so that gharar is another important thing to be noted, and how you will justify it is not their Islamic products? And from Dr. Asad, question itself, don't you think so that Islamic economic is the substituting profit markup rate for interest rate? Thank you.
First thing, comment on what Ali said. Is it working? Okay. Thank you. So your observation that the zakat is the obligatory tax, and I'm a bit concerned about how public goods will be provided, right? Because zakat has some fixed sort of uses, right? Prescribed uses, I should say. There is waqf, but obviously there will be free riding problem in that case. The good news from experimental economics is that people do contribute voluntarily towards public goods, so that might be a thing to look into. The second thing that bothers me is regarding what Dr. Asad Zaman said, that I agree that Islam transformed a rather primitive civilization. But what bothers me is that how was West successful in transforming us, right? We were supposed to be the most learned civilization at that time. So how did West do that, right? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Yes, dear respected professors, from your great lecture, I learned and I get some ideas. First, let's call back the time of Medina, Waqatul Medina. Actually, why we first, when we arrived Medina, and every person just because we are spread something really valuable, really amazing. We give totally freedom about the different people, different opinion. We welcome every type of one's value. So becomes a superpower, and gradually we receive the advantages from different empires. So until we get world popular. That's why the reason our religion becomes the best part. So we are the best nation. So how? Because we have the most largest chest. We can give any idea whether this idea is good to us or it is bad comments on us. We just receive and we think whether this idea we can get any beneficial from this. If we get absorbing different advantages from Christian, from socialism, from capitalism, and transfer it into our Islamic financial system advantages, and this will be very good. And just we open our eyes, look at this whole world. Now the financial system is mainly based on Jewish style. So they are based on riba. So if we...
Thank you. Can you be short, because we have no...
Just permission to finish one sentence. If we receive every good things from among the world, it will make our religion, our world great again. Thank you.
So we will stop at these questions, and now we have to close this at 11:30, I'm told. So we have 5 minutes each to you to look at what are the important questions, and then you can give them as on the whole answers.
Thank you for these very interesting, thought-provoking questions. So maybe I have 5 points, so 1 minute each perhaps. On Iqbal Raza Naeem, no, I agree with you actually. Because
I was including Iqbal in the tradition of the debate on Islamic economics, but I was not commenting on his entire work, right? So, and if I did comment, and I said that he was critical of both systems, but actually he reserved harsher judgments for capitalism. So in the end, I think I agree with that. He was talking about Sarmaya Mehnat, as you said. He was recognizing that, but yeah. So it's not a commentary on overall Iqbal's contribution, but just to that extent, to which I agree he did not refer back. The second question was about regulations in the market. Well, I think I have explained that there are specific institutional and there are specific instructions in the role which the HISBA as an institution, market inspector, market inspection plays. This doesn't include price control, but it addresses issues like standards and measures and deception and general conduct between traders. On the question of natural resources, well, this is a dilemma for me personally. This goes against my own understanding of how these resources should be managed, to be honest. But I have tried to be honest here and understand what are the Islamic primary sources saying about the ownership of natural resources. And I've explained that this should be under the control of the state, which is mostly, which is indeed the case, as you mentioned. So these are consistent. But having said that, I think it is the management of the resources itself is different from the ownership, and there is a degree of freedom available with the state to how to make sure that these resources are optimally utilized, and the benefits can flow to the society at large. Okay, I think I will move to the next point. So on the question of riba and its definition, I was very brief in my initial comments, but I think consensus is that riba is obviously haram, is not allowed, and I hold the same view. But the discussion is how do you define it, right? So what is the definition of riba? So one definition which recently came out, which I thought is more comprehensive, is positive and fixed ex ante. It is tied to the time period and amount of loan, and its payment is guaranteed regardless of the outcome or the purposes for which the principal loan was borrowed. And I subscribe to the same definition, but then the controversy is really to which transaction does riba apply?
I don't think there is an.
So I'm not going to do that. So just last point. So I think it applies to the only money loans and not to the overall banking and financing structure. And last point was on zakat and public goods. I think my first point is that zakat, the rates vary from 2.5% to 20%, and I know the details about how these rates apply. So it is not just maybe 2.5%, it varies. And secondly, the provision of public goods, education, health, etc., charitable purposes is also provided through the institution of Waqf. And this is an empirical question, and perhaps we can look into that at more details later on. But I do think that these should be sufficient tools to provide the public goods by both and the society.
I will answer the questions indirectly by saying that the Ummah is facing a very, very serious problem which I call the modern Mu'tazila. The ancient Mu'tazila was exactly what was referred to by one of the questioners. The debate is presented idea about whether or not reason should be used. Actually, the battle was not about reason. The problem was that when the Muslims, who were plain and simple Bedouin coming from the desert, when they first encountered Greek philosophy, they were completely dazzled. The Greek philosophy was amazing. It had extreme infinite refinement and complexity and sophistication, and they thought that, this is the highest form of knowledge. And so one group argued, the Mu'tazila, that this Greek philosophy is on par with the Wahi, and because this is human reason, it should be taken it is just as reliable as the Wahi. So the Greek philosophy, which said that Earth is the center of the universe, that women have more teeth than men, that the light starts from the eye and hits the object in order to see, and thousands of other false ideas, this was all accepted as being exactly equivalent to and on par with Wahi. And people believed these things. And this was the state religion for a while. Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala has promised to protect the religion, so the religion survived this crisis. And today we don't even know what this Greek philosophy is, and we don't know arguments both on each sides. Today we are in exactly the same position. Today the Muslims worship Western knowledge even though it's completely false. These situations, like economic theory, it's completely false. There is no reality to the idea that firms maximize profit. They don't. There is no reality, no truth to the idea that human beings maximize utilities. There is no such thing as a utility function. It is completely false that prices are determined by equilibrium, and this is something which can be established. So nonetheless, we study these and believe these and knowledge, and if somebody rejects this, we that you are against Islam, because Islam teaches you to be enlightened and accept everything that is told to you on authority. So this is the problem that we face. Now, because we absorbed all of these ideas, like one of the people, questioners, was replicating the secular idea that religion is really something which is for our personal lives, and the general knowledge is for our public lives. This is exactly the secular idea that you see, it comes from European experience. If you allow religion interfere into the public debate, people will start fighting, so better get rid of it. This is not the Islamic experience, and Islam has a very detailed and complex and sophisticated theory of how we talk to other religion people and what is their status, what rights they have. But nobody knows that anymore, except for our professor here who's studied it deeply. But anyway, the point is that because we have absorbed all of these absolutely false and bogus ideas as part of our knowledge, then the questions that we ask are based on the assumptions of Western secular knowledge, and these questions are not even in the right direction, because the first process that we need to do is to unlearn these ideas. Then we begin to understand what Islam says and what Islam. So Islamic society, the solution that we have are not within the ballpark. They are not on the horizon. They are not visible to the West, because our solutions are based on communities. When the secular society arose, communities were destroyed because it was the idea of collective action became impossible, because there were different communities. They were all fighting each other. So they said that, look, prior to that, the idea of society was that this is one whole body and they work together for common purpose. This idea was explicit, it was abandoned. And then the idea came that we have to live under the rule of law, we have to just learn how to live peacefully with each other. And but the idea of collective action was then only possible for the state. So today, we are thinking, we do something, if we want to do something collective, it has to be the state which does it, because individuals do not have a common purpose. So this is against the Islamic conception of what society is. So the solutions that Islam offers are not visible within the framework of the theories that we are taught in the West. Thank you.
Well, we have already 5 minutes past, so I will just make 3 sentences to conclude. I must thank Professor Dr. Asad Zaman. We need these reminders, because Islamization of knowledge was a partly attempt, and Islamic economic was built on that purpose. I think to build a discipline, to remind us that we are working or going into that field, developing that field in an environment which is where other systems of education, where other academics also exist, and we have to not politics, but we have to respond to our colleagues in these different disciplines. What has happened, I think, is problematic. While I thank both and admire both presentations, I think the problem that the colonial experience has been devastating for us. And as Malik bin Nabi has said, that we have started behaving like colonials. And like the colonials started saying that we are backward and all these sciences are nothing, and only light is coming from the European center. So this Eurocentrism made us act in the same way. So we are rejecting all these differences, and we want to develop something as a new colonial counter idea of knowledge, which is dangerous to both. And I think that we should be looking at it. Problem is this: we cannot make the binary dichotomy, and in that sense what happens is that the concept of secularism has also been treated and religionized. We think that secularism is also another. I'm not going into details, but I'm just. The second thing that happened is that Islam, being perfect and complete, was developed theologically and legally, and the result was that at the time, ijtihad, the door of ijtihad was practically closed, and then whatever we have to do, whatever reform we accept reform, we have to do within the already accepted knowledge. Use the term gunjaish. Is there a space? Is there a space for accommodation? So we really do not reconstruct or we do not review the sciences, but we make space. And because of that, we are not really contributing to the principle or the philosophy of that discipline, and we are not really encountering the new challenges because we recognize that this is a challenge, because we are thinking that it's only affecting some part of our thinking, part of our culture, some part of our heritage. So we amend that. But we should, I think especially in economics and politics, we have realized with the great with great sorrowness that we have been on the side of suffering from misunderstanding of the modernity and misunderstanding of what we are going through. So my idea would be, accepting Professor Asad Zaman's idea, that it should not be a partial amendment, we should be looking at the whole of the experience, and we should be going back to the Islamic teachings in the Quran and Sunnah, and looking at the whole idea, build a new narrative, a new field, and new principles, and realize that the world has changed a lot between these periods, and we should be not only recognizing the development in the science, development in technology, but also we should be realizing that we are no longer living in an isolated isle, but we are part of this globalization, we are part of this globalized world, and we have to be responsible and responsive. I thank you very much, and I think that, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid Masood. It was a very fruitful, insightful, and a productive session. And I would like to add one thing, that
Allama Iqbal has extensively criticized socialism in his Persian book Javed Nama. In Urdu poetry, he usually Marx, he praised him, but in his Persian book, Iqbal criticized socialism in the voice of Jamaluddin Afghani. Now, I would like, and I will request Dr. Khalid Masood to present a souvenir to Dr. Asad Zaman. And
announcement भी कर लें, टी ब्रेक कितना है, उससे पहले शॉर्ट 10 to 15 minutes कर लें, 10 to 15.
ठीक है,
फिर उसके बाद वो आ जाएंगे. Yeah, take. Yeah. So we will during the tea break we will have a ceremony of outside at the bookstall for